Hello everybody and welcome back to Herbie's Garage. Today we're working on the 2024 Lifan KPX 250, and this video is going to be a viewer suggested video, and I'm going to be lubing and adjusting both the clutch cable and the throttle cable. So let's go ahead and get started right away. We're going to go ahead and get started by taking the throttle housing off. These are 8mm bolts. And your housing will just come apart, and then we can take the cable out of it. Don't let it fall. The back half just comes off. I'm going to go ahead and screw these back in so I don't lose them until I'm ready to put it back together. This is what it looks like from the back side. You just got to pull this throttle tube piece out of the housing. It just slips in there. It's no big deal. It just slips in this housing here and it pops out. Okay, now that you have the cable removed out of the throttle tube, I just want to show you how this is supposed to go in. It just slides in until the cable lines up with that notch, and then it spins around. One thing we want to do while we're getting ready to lube this cable is we want to clean this area here to make sure that our throttle tube spins freely on there. We'll do that as soon as we're done with the cable. Now we're going to peel back this rubber like that. I'm going to unscrew that piece off of it, and then we're going to lift this off of the cable like that. What our intention is we want to get lube down in that hole so it goes down into the cable tube. Now I have a Motion Pro cable luber, but because of the design of this cable, it makes it really difficult to be able to take all this stuff off and be able to get this cable luber on there. Take a little bit of Motion Pro cable lube, and I'm just going to kind of hold this around in case I miss the hole, like that. And it's got a little bit of a gap around that cable. Just going to spray some in there and let it kind of work its way in. It's not going to take a whole lot. Just let it work in a little at a time. And once you give it 4 or 5 good squirts, you can go ahead and take your cable and work it up and down to make sure that lube works its way down the cable. And then we'll give it a couple more squirts. Okay, that should be enough. We're going to work the cable a little bit more. Okay, that should be good enough. We'll put a little bit of this lube up here. It's on my hands. Now, one of the best effective cleaners that I like is a WD-40. It does such a good job. And you just spray some on it and work it in real good. Clean it up nice. Because if you have any kind of stickiness, residue to it whatsoever, it'll want to stick. You don't want that. You want a nice clean throttle so it'll return the way it's supposed to return. Then you can put a little bit in your tube if you want. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shove my rag in here. Clean it up real good. And so you can see all that stuff that was in my tube. Some of that's probably old grease that I've put in it. And if you're wondering what kind of lube I'm going to use putting it back together, you know, if you ride a lot of off-road where you're going to get a lot of dirt and things in there, I would suggest just putting it on like that. Don't put anything on it. It works really well once it's good and clean. But if you ride mostly on road like I do, and I don't get a lot of mud and junk in there, what I'm going to do is just put a light layer of this cable lube on there and just kind of work it in with my finger. That's all it's going to take, just a little bit on there. And that should be fine. All right, now we're going to go ahead and put this back together. First thing we want to do is we want to put this little round piece into our tube. So we'll just put the cable down, line it up, and line the cable up with the slot and run it around like that. And that should stay. Now we're going to take our two pieces and we're going to put this together like it's supposed to be. And you can, if you want to, put a little bit of lube inside here where that is going to rub against it. It's not going to take much. We'll just put just a little bit in there. Okay, when you put this on, you have to turn your throttle. You have to line this up at the top like this. Then you have to turn your throttle a little bit to pull your cable and then push your tube into your housing. Like that. Now your throttle should move. Okay, now that you got it in the proper position, put your other half on and hold it together, and then we'll start the bolts. Now that we have the bolts started in there, we're holding the two halves together. We're going to go ahead and slowly tighten these. We're going to try to do a little each time. You don't want to get one side too tight, get it tighter than the other. You just kind of got to go back and forth on them. And you can see the distance I have in here. I'll push it in once I get it close. Okay, I'm getting it close, so I'm going to push it in to where I want it. I'm going to line this up straight with the bars the way that I want it. I'm just going to go ahead and tighten this down. You don't want to over tighten it. Don't get your hand out here at the end of the ratchet and put the grunt to it. Just kind of put it up close to the end like that. That way you don't over tighten it. Then check your throttle to make sure it's working, snapping back the way it's supposed to. All right, now we're going to adjust it. Okay, now we're going to take the adjustment up here. We're going to screw this all the way in. We'll move this star wheel and get it close to the inside like that. And then we're going to screw this all the way in. What that's going to do is that's going to give us a lot of slack. See all that slack? So we'll take the slack up down below. Now I'm going to pull the throttle so you can see what's moving down here. Now you can see the cable, and here's the adjuster. We're going to take the major part of the adjustment out of the slack down here, and then up at the handlebar, we'll do the minor final adjustment up there. So we've got a little bit too much slack in it, so it will tighten this nut. And what that's going to do, we'll have to hold the cable. This is an 8mm. I'm going to have so many hands in here, hopefully you can still see. I'm going to hold the cable with an 8mm, then I'm going to tighten this 10mm nut. And I'm going to keep going until I feel like I've got a majority of the slack out of the cable. Let me check it. Yeah, just a little bit more. Okay, let me check it. A little bit more. Check it. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. We'll make our final little adjustment up at the top. Now that we have that adjusted, we'll take this bottom nut and this will lock it all together. There we go. It's good and tight, I think. One more little squinge on it. Right there. That's good and tight. See, it has a little bit of slack in the cable. Okay, now we want to check it up here and see how much slack is in it. And in order to take the slack out, we need to turn the smaller star nut out to take the slack out of it. And see, we're getting really close right there. I think that's probably about as much as we want to get. You really want about anywhere between 1/8 and 1/16. You don't want much movement. About 1/8 of an inch is what they recommend. But you want enough slack in it to where when you turn stop to stop with your handlebars, you're not revving your engine up. So now that we have that set where we want it, we'll go ahead and run this bigger star wheel nut out to the smaller one, and then that's going to lock it in place up here. Now we'll just take some pliers, and don't do this very hard at all. Just jam the two together because you're dealing with plastic right there, and if you break that plastic, you'll be in for a little bit of a headache. So, and shove this back on there, and we'll check it one more time. Feels perfect. Okay, now we're done with the throttle side. We'll go over to the clutch. To make it a little bit easier to work with and to see, I'm going to go ahead and take these hand guards off, get them out of the way. Because it's going to make it kind of hard for you to see and me to be able to work. It's only 2 bolts. These hand guards work really well for keeping the bugs off, and if you're riding through the woods, keeping the branches from hitting your hands and stuff. If you were to fall over, it's not really going to help much. Okay, next we need to take this cable out. In order to get this cable out, I'm going to take this lever off. And this lever has a 8mm on the bottom. It's just a nut that jams it on. And then we have this JIS or Phillips screw on the top. And I'll show you whenever I put this back together on how to properly set this screw. Okay, we'll pull the pin out. And there's the pin. That's kind of stuck on there. I'm going to have to get that off before I put that pin back in. Now we have the pin removed, we're going to go ahead and take this cable out. So what we need to do is, see, there's a groove that goes all the way through this. There's a groove through this nut, and there's also a groove through this nut. You got to line everything up. Then you can pull your cable out like that, and then you can pull it out. And it just sets in the bottom like this. Real easy. This has got a pretty big opening in it, so it's pretty easy to squirt down in the hole. Just give it a couple of shots. Let it work in a little bit, and then you can work the cable. Let that lube get down in there. Now, just in case I didn't mention this, if you ever change these cables out and you go to an expensive Teflon coated cable, it's got Teflon lining in it, you probably don't want to put any lube in it. It's better off to run the bare cable to the bare Teflon coating. They design it that way, basically. How many squirts am I putting in it? I'm probably going to put about 10 squirts in it, something like that. Put a couple in it and then work it, a couple in it, then work it. This is not a hard thing to do, so you should do this occasionally. So it's not a big deal if you don't get a whole bunch in here if you do your periodic maintenance. I think that should be enough. Now see, this pin has that buildup on it, and just that little bit of buildup is enough to cause a little bit of a stickiness to it. So we want to try to get as much of that off as we can. Now I'm just going to use a little bit of this cable lube and put on my lever and on my pin. Alright, now I'll take my cable, I'll put it in my lever like that, and then I'll put the cable in this fitting, line all the slots up, drop it in like that, fold it around, and then put the pin in. Now I have in the past used grease to put on here, and grease works well. It stays in there, but sometimes grease gets a little bit sticky. So I thought I'd use this. So, all right. Now what you have to do with this is you just run it down till it's snug. Do not tighten this. Just run it till it's snug like that. And then you have a Teflon lock nut on the bottom. As you can see, it's thinner on one side, then thicker on the other. The thinner side, smaller side, you want to put down. Put it on, and we're going to run it up. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to hold the screw with the screwdriver, and then we're going to tighten the nut on the bottom. We just barely have this screw snug, remember? Because if you squeeze on it, if you tighten this down, it's going to squeeze on that hand lever, and then it's just going to make the lever hard to pull. So you don't want to get that too tight. And then you just snug this one on the bottom. You want to get it tight, but you don't want to get it over tight because it will squish the thing as well. That's why they make a locking nut for that. Clutch to make sure that it pulls easily and snaps back the way it's supposed to, and it does. Now we want to make our adjustment. As you can see, I'm going to put my adjustment all the way in, and I have very little slack. So what I need to do is I need to loosen it up just a little bit down below and then take it up here. Since this is so difficult to get to because of the exhaust being in the way, we're just going to take the whole bracket loose, and then we'll take the bracket out, make a small adjustment, and then we'll put it all back. Okay, now with the 13 millimeter, we're just going to loosen these nuts. Now what we have is our cable is a little bit too tight. So what we want to do is we want to push it this way. So what we have to do to push it this way is we have to loosen this nut just a little bit because it's not off by much. And then we're going to tighten this bottom one. Okay, as you can see, I moved this nut. I got it loose and I moved it. So we've got slack in it. So now we're going to put this back into place. All right, now we've got this back in place, we'll go ahead and tighten this up. Like that. Now our cable's still loose. I took the adjustment out of the front nut. Now I'm going to tighten this back nut. Should have just enough room in here to turn your wrench. There we go. That's tight. Okay, now that I got that adjustment down there, you can see I've got more free play up here at the clutch. So I'm going to go ahead and take just a little bit out. It's not going to need much. You want to fine tune it up here and make your major adjustment down there. You only want to make that adjustment down there once, because once you make it down there, your cable's never going to get shorter. It's always just going to get a little longer over time from stretching. So you just want to barely snug this once you get it to where you want it. And then put your boot over it and check it. Make sure everything's working smooth and good. Okay, now all we need to do is check the throttle operation to make sure when we turn it to the right or we turn it to the left, it doesn't increase the engine RPM. I'll let go of the throttle. That's all the way to the right, all the way to the left. And it doesn't look like it's affecting the throttle at all. So I think we're good. Yep. Now we'll check the clutch. I'll pull the clutch in, put it in gear, we'll release it. It starts to grab about halfway out. That's perfect. Easy to put into gear, easy to find neutral. So, maintenance item off the list. That's not extremely difficult. Takes a little bit of time to do. My only caution to you would be on the clutch adjustment down on the engine. It's not super easy to do, and if you don't have to do it, I probably wouldn't. If you can get your adjustment out up here at the top and you want about maybe 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch on your clutch of free play in it, and if you have that, don't even mess with it down below. But if you need to adjust it, it's not really that difficult to do, but because of the exhaust, it just makes it a little bit more difficult. But nothing's really hard. It just takes a little bit of time. So anyway, it's maintenance items that we need to do. We got ours done, and hopefully you can get yours done. All right, I appreciate everybody coming along, and I'll see you on the next one.